Мгм. Добре, вже 6 година, тому ми будемо починати. Вітаю всіх, шановні колеги. Мене звуть Анастасія Тичук, я методистка мережі шкіл Green Country та академічного центру TalkEn.Cloud. Я маю досвід в проведенні багатьох воркшопів, тренінгів та вебінарів для викладачів, а також маю досвід в розробці навчальних та методичних матеріалів. І сьогодні ми з вами поговоримо про розвиток критичного та креативного мислення в учнів молодшої школи. Тому вітаю всіх. Але перш ніж ми розпочнемо безпосередньо говорити по темі нашого вебінару, я б хотіла е, обговорити декілька організаційних питань. Отже, перш за все, хочу зазначити, що наша зустріч відбувається в форматі вебінару, що означає, що я, на жаль, не бачу вас та не чую, але ви можете залишати свої коментарі в чаті, і протягом вебінару я буду намагатися переглядати та відповідати, а також буду час від часу залучати вас на якісь завдання, та щоб ви відповідали в чаті. Також хочу вам нагадати, що за цей вебінар ви можете отримати сертифікат, але сертифікат є платним, його вартість 100 гривень. Щоб отримати сертифікат, вам треба за його сплатити. Як ви це можете зробити? Коли ви реєструвалися на вебінар, ви отримали лист з інформацією щодо вебінару, з посиланням, та в цьому листі ви можете знайти реквізити, за якими ви можете сплатити за сертифікат. Потім вам необхідно буде зробити скріншот та надіслати цей скріншот на адресу, з якої ви отримали лист, на ту саму скриньку. І все. Протягом 24 годин після завершення цього вебінару вам на скриньку прийде лист з інформацією щодо тесту. Ви отримаєте посилання на цей тест та зможете його виконати. Якщо ви отримаєте 80 правильних відповідей та більше, ніж 80% правильних відповідей, то ви отримаєте сертифікат. Також хочу зазначити, що кількість спроб виконання цього тесту є необмеженою, тому ви можете його виконувати декілька разів, скільки вам забажається. Також через день, наступного дня після завершення цього вебінару, ви отримаєте лист з підсумком всієї інформації, яку ви почуєте сьогодні на вебінарі. Це буде стаття з інформацією з вебінару та ще раз нагадування про можливість отримати сертифікат та як можна його отримати, там інформація про тест. Це такі організаційні питання. Якщо щось не зрозуміло, пишіть в чаті. А зараз я б хотіла трошки приділити часу та розповісти вам про платформу TalkEn.Cloud, саме про організаторів нашого вебінару. Отже, що таке TalkEn.Cloud? TalkEn.Cloud – це, я б сказала, сукупність можливостей для викладача. По-перше, це бібліотека інтерактивних підручників, які ви можете використовувати на своїх заняттях. TalkEn.Cloud – це також система менеджменту навчального процесу, тобто LMS-ка. Та TalkEn.Cloud має власну академію розвитку мовних шкіл. Це центр, де ми співпрацюємо з школами, партнерами та консультуємо, проводимо вебінари, тренінги тощо, надаємо супровід. Отже, давайте детальніше розглянемо складові TalkEn.Cloud, і ми розпочнемо з інтерактивних підручників. Отже, бібліотека TalkEn.Cloud налічує більш ніж 50 інтерактивних підручників для різних вікових категорій, для школярів та для дорослих, починаючи з рівня Pre-A1 та завершуючи рівнем C1. Тобто маємо розуміти, що теми будуть відрізнятися в залежності, та наповнення буде відрізнятися в залежності від рівня та вікової категорії студентів. Також, окрім підручника, викладачі мають доступ до Teachers Guideів. Це деталізовані плани занять для кожного підручника, де ви можете побачити інструкції до того, як проводити те або інше завдання, корисні посилання, якісь рекомендації, тобто все необхідне для проведення занять. За допомогою інтерактивного підручнику ви можете відстежувати прогрес учня в виконанні завдань. Учні також можуть це моніторити, вони можуть подивитися, скільки відсотків було виконано та скільки з цих відсотків було виконано вірно, можуть перевірити свої відповіді, подивитися правильні відповіді. Також інтерактивний підручник має вже автоматизовану перевірку тестів до кожного підручника. Умовно, наприклад, після другого юніту ваші учні мають складати тест за розкладом. Тобто вам не треба його перевіряти самостійно, вам лише треба нагадати учням про те, що вони мають скласти тест, вони відкривають цей тест на платформі та виконують, і платформа перевіряє цей тест автоматично. Ви можете відкрити, подивитися, переглянути, чи все вірно, може ви хочете подивитися помилки студентів, тобто, і потім вже, виходячи з цієї інформації, надати фідбек. Тобто нічого власноруч вам перевіряти не треба, це дуже спрощує робочий процес. Також, окрім Teachers Guide та підручників, викладачі мають доступ до бібліотеки інтерактивних воркшитів. Тобто це такі воркшити за різними темами, лексичні, граматичні та на якісь цікаві теми, типу Easter, Eurovision, I don't know, там різні теми тематичні. І за потреби або за бажанням викладачі можуть власноруч створювати такі інтерактивні воркшити та потім використовувати їх на своїх заняттях. Тобто оце все ви можете знайти, якщо будете користуватися бібліотекою інтерактивних підручників. Далі, якщо ми розглядаємо TalkEn.Cloud як систему менеджменту навчального процесу, то ми маємо розуміти, що це такий кабінет, власний кабінет, в якому ми можемо організувати свій робочий процес. Тобто ця система дозволяє створювати нам профілі учнів, створювати групи, об'єднувати їх в групи, створювати індивідуальні заняття, генерувати розклад, прикріплювати тести або залишати якісь домашні завдання додаткові, залишати фідбек якийсь, також виставляти оцінки, якщо треба, моніторити прогрес учнів, і через цю платформу ви одразу можете перейти на інтерактивний підручник, тобто ви відкриваєте My Course Books ось тут та переходите до занять. Тобто, якщо ви вже давно були в пошуку платформи, на якій ви можете моніторити навчальний процес студентів, створювати групки, а також використовувати підручники, то я раджу спробувати TalkEn.Cloud. Я думаю, що це найкомфортніша платформа для викладачів, для організації навчального процесу. Отже, це трошки інформації про TalkEn.Cloud, а зараз ми переходимо до теми нашого вебінару. And we will be talking about developing creativity and critical thinking in young learners. So first of all, we will identify who young learners are, what their needs and interests are, and how they differ from teenagers, for example. So what the main characteristics of young learners are. And based on this information, we will try to find out some ways to approach young learners. So I'm going to share some tips, some ideas how we can approach young learners, what we can do with young learners to develop their learning strategies. After that, we will move on to talking about 21st century skills, what they are, why they're important, what students can do with the skills, how they can be helpful, and we will discuss how we can help learners develop these skills. And I'm going to show you some practical tips, some activities that we can introduce in our classes, in our lessons. So let's get started. And I'd like to start by conducting a quick survey just to find out your opinion. So just think about young learners and write in chat who young learners are, what they like, what they hate, and what they have. So how you can continue the statements that you can see on my screen. Try to think about these statements and write your answers in chat. I'll give you 1 minute and I will wait for your answers. I'll see them in chat. Alrighty, I already see some answers. Okay, so young learners like games for sure, like playing, that's right. What else? Okay, they're kids, yeah. They hate learning. They hate boring lessons. They're very creative. They hate boredom. Right. What about the last statements they have? What do they have, in your opinion? They usually have troubles with full sentences, have a lot of energy, great imagination. Okay, good. Thank you for your ideas. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you have stated some of the key features of young learners. And when we talk about young learners, we usually think of kids who are 6 years old and older, so those who study at the primary school. Yeah, but then again, if we start thinking about young learners more, and if we dig deeper, we might recall that some of students, some of young learners start learning English in the kindergarten when they're being 3 years old. So they start learning English at the age of 3. So that's why we can call them very young learners. So students who are 3 to 5 years old are called very young learners, and those who are 6 to 12 years old called young learners. Even though those students, like from both groups, come from non-English speaking environments, and they're usually at the very at the elementary or even beginner level of English, they share some common features, but at the same time, there are certain differences that we need to understand when planning our lessons, when working with kids. So, and these differences are mainly connected with the cognitive development and social and emotional development of these students. So let's look at some differences. So when we talk about cognitive development, we need to understand that very young learners are at the very beginning of their learning journey. So they only start to explore the world. They can barely speak even in their native language. Yes, sometimes we may find that like those who are 3 years old, they can barely make sentences in Ukrainian. Yeah, so it means that it will be difficult for them to understand something in English as well. So they learn through senses and motor activities, which means they see something, they hear something, they touch something, and only then they understand what it is. So if they see a teacher show them like that this is an apple, they can see this apple, they can touch this apple, and even if they try this apple, they will understand that this is called an apple. So they start developing their object permanence, which means that they understand that objects continue to exist even when they're out of sight, even when they cannot see them. And finally, very young learners have concrete thinking. So which means they trust what they see, what they hear, what they can touch. Whilst young learners start developing their critical and logical thinking, they start analyzing their actions, analyzing something, evaluating, and they try to come to some logical conclusions. Very young learners also try to develop the ability to understand complex sentences. They try to learn more vocabulary, expand their vocabulary, and they learn how to express their thoughts fluently using target language, using new information that they have learned. If we talk about social and emotional development, we need to understand that very young learners develop their social skills and learn mainly through interaction with parents and caregivers, because at this age, it can be the only source of information. So parents are the only source of information. And we need to understand that these learners only start exploring their emotions. They only start to understand what kind of emotions they can feel, they can experience, and it might be really hard for them to control them. So they only start developing these emotion regulation skills. They start learning how to control them, but at the very beginner level. If we talk about young learners, they develop their social skills, they develop empathy and collaboration through the interaction with their peers. So with their classmates and so on, they try to learn from them, and also they try to learn how to manage their emotions and behavior. So they are more conscious about their behavior and emotions that they experience, and they need to understand that sometimes they need to control them. So overall, we need to understand that young learners usually have no motivation to study. I mean, they don't really understand why they study, why they need to learn English. They usually start doing it because it's a part of their school program, school curriculum, or because their parents told them so. So they don't have a clear goal why they need to learn English, how it can be helpful for them in future, because they don't see it. They can't think about it now. So that's why we have to find ways how to motivate them, how to encourage and engage them into the learning process. So there are some other things that we need to know about young learners, and you have already mentioned some of them. So the first thing is that young learners are very energetic and physically active. It's really hard for them to sit still and focus on one activity for a long time. They want to move, they want to run, they want to do something. That's why it's very important to keep this balance between stirring and settling activities. And it's important for us teachers to plan various energetic activities, something that requires our learners to move, like, for example, a game called Simon Says, or other activities that would encourage these students to move. The next one is that young learners are usually spontaneous, and they're not afraid to speak out or participate. So in fact, they don't care that much about what they say. They're not concerned about how people might think about them, how others might judge them. So they're more confident when it comes to answering questions or participating, because so they're not afraid to do so, and they're also good imitators of some accents of some languages. So they're not afraid to repeat after the teacher or sing along. That's why we can easily introduce some songs or rhymes or chants and dialects. We can introduce some activities that would provide students with an opportunity to be expressive, um, that would encourage students to speak. The next one is that young learners are usually very curious and receptive to new ideas. So uh, the world is something new for them, and they're eager to discover it. They're eager to learn and find out something new. That's why I'm sure that you've heard many times the question why from your students, and sometimes these why questions are really crazy. It is something that we have never anticipated. Very often it just we are not prepared to answer these questions because we don't understand how they can come up with such questions. That is because they are curious, and that is why we have to prepare some activities that spark students' curiosity, that um, help students develop their curiosity. For example, an activity which is called a mystery bag, that is when they, for example, take something from the bag, they have to describe it to others, or they have to guess what it is. So the next one, our students are very imaginative and enjoy make believes. They enjoy pretending to be somebody else. They enjoy playing. They enjoy, I don't know, some drama games. That's why we can introduce some storytelling activities, role-playing activities, and activities that allow students to use their imagination and create something. Next, so we've been talking that young learners are active and they're full of energy, but at the same time, they can be easily distracted because they have short attention span. It's really hard for them to stay focused on one activity for more than, I don't know, 7 minutes. So they get bored, they want to do something else. That's why it's important to learn how to catch students' attention using attention grabbers, some phrases that catch their attention, or you can catch students' attention with the help of videos, pictures, some sounds, or you can plan lessons as a series of short activities that last no longer than 10 minutes. In such way, your students won't get tired and bored of the activities. The next one, young learners tend to be egocentric, and it's really hard for them to see to perceive the information from the other perspective. So they relate all the ideas to themselves. They think about their needs and wants, and it's really hard for them to understand what other people think, their opinions, and it's hard for them to respect others. That's why we have to um, find time and introduce activities that allow students to share information with their peers. So they have to share something with each other and then listen, learn how to listen and respect each other. And of course, it's a good idea to introduce some personalized tasks that will help students understand how they can relate these tasks to their real life. And finally, young learners are social and they are learning to relate to others. They enjoy talking to others. So it's a good idea to have a balance of interaction partners. So when you plan a lesson, make sure that your lesson has a variety of interaction partners, individual work, pair or group work, open class activities, and maybe teacher to student interaction. So It brings us to the next point here. How, given this information that we have discussed, how can we approach teaching young learners? The first thing that we need to understand is how young learners learn languages. So let's take a look. So first of all, they learn by doing something and by interacting with the environment, which means that they trust their senses to make sense of the surrounding world. That's what I mentioned before. Uh, they trust what they see, what they hear, what they can touch. So, for example, a child learns what a door is by closing it and opening it many times, and only then this child understands what a door is. The next one, our students learn through interaction with adults. Again, I have already mentioned it that uh, adults very often become the main source of information just because our students are not that confident when it comes to using the internet or searching for something on the internet, discovering new information. And that's why they rely on teachers or on parents, caregivers to help them discover new information. And it means that they require our support and motivation. And finally, young learners learn through meaningful exposure and practice. As I've told you, sometimes they don't understand why they learn English. That's why we have to encourage them all the time. We have to find ways to motivate them. And if the language is presented in the context which is not meaningful, or the context which is not relevant to students, they have no clear reason why they have to use this language. They're not going to be motivated. So we have to provide this purpose. We have to show them the reason why they need to learn this language, to watch some cartoons, or to, for example, to play some Roblox game, or just any other game on their phone, or to talk about what they like, what they dislike, to have good marks at school. So we have to motivate them and help them find this purpose, show them how it can be relevant, and show them that it can be meaningful. And it brings us to the next one. It brings us to the point where we need to understand what roles we as teachers play in a young learner classroom. So can you write in chat, what roles do you think teachers play in class when it comes to working with young learners? Waiting for your answers in chat. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Yeah, I can see some responses. Yeah, organizer, facilitator, educator, learning expert. That's right. Good. So, uh, mhm. Okay, so the first one, it's a language model. Well, obviously, we have to be the example for students. We have to show them how to use the target language correctly, how to use it in context, how to pronounce the words, how to use different grammar structures. So we have to play the role of a model, and we have to be the source of information. Well, in a perfect scenario, it's a good idea if it's a good idea if we teach our students how to get information from different sources, but if it's not possible, try to be at least a good source of information. Yep, provide information that is interesting for students. The next one, facilitator of learning, we need to understand that young learners need new experiences. They don't need the lectures, they don't need long theories or long explanations. So we have to understand that they learn by doing something, and it means that we need to help them learn the information without even realizing it. So with the help of songs, some crafts, projects, videos, activities that help them discover information without even understanding that they're actually learning. So they learn by doing, they learn by play. The next one, obviously, we have to be supporters. We have to encourage our learners and motivate them. We have to celebrate their successes. We have to support them when they feel shy. We have to provide some prompts and help them brainstorm some ideas. The next one is that we have to be classroom managers. So it means establishing classroom routines, providing students with some classroom languages that they can use in class, choosing the appropriate interaction patterns, making sure that students work in pairs or in groups, that they understand the material, addressing students' needs and interests, and making sure that just everything is good at the lesson. The next one, observer. So if we want to help students achieve some results, we have to understand their learning style. We have to understand their needs and interests. We have to understand what they're struggling with. In order to do that, we have to observe, we have to monitor, and then take some actions. And finally, we have to be creative entertainers because students learn when they're doing something fun, when it's interesting. They learn through games, they learn through interaction with others. So we have to ensure that the atmosphere in class is pleasant, that students feel safe, and there are plenty of games or interactive activities for students to engage. So that's it. So tell me, please, which roles do you often perform when you work with young learners? Do you perform all of them, or perhaps there's something that you often forget about? Mhm. So you can leave your answers in chat, and we are going to move on. So so we have talked about how young learners learn and what roles we play, and now I would like to show you some tips, suggest some like strategies that we can use to help learners develop their skills. So the first one is introducing game-based learning. Um, as we have already discussed, that students learn by doing something, and when they play, it reduces their anxiety and it makes the learning process more enjoyable, and it makes it easier for them to understand the topic and absorb the language. So try to include some game-based elements into your lessons. The next one is storytelling and songs. So storytelling develops students' creativity skills. And songs and stories build vocabulary, introduce grammar, and reinforce pronunciation. And they also create associations between language and meaning, which helps students make sense of new information. The next one is using total physical response. So TPR approach helps learners connect language with movement. For example, if you're introducing a new, if you're introducing new vocabulary to students, and if you ask them to mime something or move while you're learning these words, while they're repeating after you, they are more likely to retain this information and like memorize these words. On my screen, you can see examples of some uh, activities that you can use to practice total physical response. Okay, the next one, it's using repetition and routines. So we need to understand that young learners benefit from repeated exposure to language. The more they hear the words and phrases in different contexts, the more confident they feel about using the words. So if you make it a routine, if you establish some routines, like using classroom language for interacting with others or for asking for advice or asking for help, your students will be required to use this language. So try to build language skills through using repetition and routine phrases. The next one is using visual aids and realia to facilitate learning. Um, Again, as I mentioned, students learn by interacting with the environment, which means that if they see the pictures, um, they can make some associations and they're more likely to understand what the words mean and remember that. So, speaking of visuals, we can use presentations, flashcards, videos, infographics, posters, pictures, diagrams, and so many other things that can serve as visual aids. The next one, scaffolding or helping students, providing some prompts, providing language support throughout the whole learning process. So you can do it by modeling, providing some examples, simplifying language, and gradually increasing complexity as learners move, as they develop their skills. You can provide some sentence starters, some prompts that they can use, help them brainstorm some ideas. And finally, make your learning interactive. Students learn by interacting with others. They're eager to talk and learn from their peers. So try to include more pair work, introduce some interactive games, give students projects to do, or add some role-playing activities. So add activities that promote communication and collaboration. So these are some tips, some recommendations that you can follow to help learners learn and develop their skills. And speaking of skills, we're going to talk about 21st century skills, what they are and why they're important. Well, when we talk about 21st century skills, we talk about abilities and competencies that our students need to have in order to succeed in the modern world. So what do you think? What these skills are? Can you write them in chat? What skills should our students have or develop in order to succeed in today's world? Waiting for your answers in chat. Okay, yeah, speaking skills. All right, what else? Chatting in social media, right. Teamwork, right. Absolutely correct. What else? critical thinking, creativity. Yeah, so right. So let's look at these skills. They can be divided into three categories. The first one is literacy skills. It's the skills the students should have in order to communicate with others, in order to be like able to express their ideas. In different ways. So it's they should have some information knowledge. They should be able to uh, they should know how to use technology. They should be aware of different social media and how to use different media. The next one category is called life skills. This category includes flexibility, leadership, initiative, productivity, and social skills, skills that are necessary for students to succeed in their career in future, right? And finally, we have learning skills, skills that help us develop as as people develop our learning abilities. So these skills include creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. So we're going to focus on creativity and critical thinking today. So when we talk about creativity and critical thinking, it's important to mention Bloom's taxonomy, the table of competencies that we want our students to develop as they move, as they learn and master a language. So if we look at this table, we can see different types of skills, and they're divided into HOTS and LOTS. So by LOTS, we mean lower order skills. So these are some skills that require us that take part in basic information processes. So we just get acquainted with the information. We are required to remember this information, recall information, understand it, and perhaps apply this information, use information in new situations. If we move higher, we can see that we have higher order thinking skills. These skills require us to analyze our actions, draw connections among ideas, evaluate, express our opinion, argue, select, support opinions, and create, produce something new, develop something new, yeah, investigate. So creativity and critical thinking are considered to be higher order thinking skills as they take part in more advanced thinking processes. So if we talk about creativity, we need to understand what it is. Creativity is the ability to produce new ideas, original ideas. It's always called like thinking out of the box. It's about using imagination and expressing oneself in unique ways. If we talk about classroom settings, creativity can be seen when our students are required to come up with some unusual solutions or express their opinion, come up with some creative ways of doing something, create some projects, do some crafts, and so on. When they write an essay or when just they speak and imagine something. So this is when they use creativity. When we talk about critical thinking, it's the ability to think clearly and rationally. It's the ability to ask questions, analyze, evaluate, make connections, solve problems, and come up with some decisions, right? So why are these skills important, and why should we help our students develop these skills? Well, first of all, language is a tool for thinking. So when our students learn a language, they develop not only their linguistic skills, but also thinking skills, because they have to think, they have to analyze, evaluate, they have to select something, they have to choose the right answer, they have to explain their point of view. That's why they develop both linguistic and thinking skills. The next one is that these skills support long-term learning. So they're called life skills because they prepare students for real life, and when they just grow old, when they graduate from the university and they'll enter and they will get a job, they'll be required to show some creativity, use some critical thinking when solving different problems. They also increase students' motivation, and they build confidence and independence. And of course, as I mentioned, they prepare learners for real life. So, how can we help our students develop their skills? Well, first of all, we need to understand that there might be some factors, some problems that hinder the development of creativity and critical thinking in class. So the first one is lesson structure and planning. So if your lessons are too controlled, so there is like too much controlled practice, if the lessons are too predictable or dominated by drills and rote learning, there is no freedom, there is no space for freedom, there's no opportunity for students to explore, to discover. So we have to find some ways and let students be curious, wonder, and explore. We have to find these opportunities. The next one is that sometimes, well, our students can't be creative, like can't use their creativity because they're afraid of making mistakes and losing marks. So they're afraid that if they show some creativity, if they use their imagination and write about this, uh, they will do something that the teacher doesn't expect, so their answer might be wrong, so they're afraid of losing marks. So that's why we have to show students that there is no wrong answer and that all opinions are welcome, that it's okay to make mistakes if they're concerned about making grammar or vocabulary mistakes. But if it's not about grammar or vocabulary, it's all right. We have different opinions. All opinions are welcome, and they're welcome to express their opinions, to use the imagination, and they're welcome to be creative. The next one is that sometimes our lessons have only close-ended questions. And if there are no open-ended questions, so there is no opportunities for students to express their ideas because they're only required to say yes or no, or what is expected for them to say. So find some opportunities and allow students uh, to express themselves, allow different interpretations, solutions, or ideas. The next one is connected with time, is that very often when we have like very strict time limits or we are running out of time, we might forget about creativity. So we often skip some creative tasks because these tasks require time, they require time for preparation, or we skip deeper discussions. So, of course, it's easier to do some controlled practice tasks of matching activity, and that will be it. But these tasks do not develop students' creative and critical thinking skills. So we have to find time, we have to plan our lessons wisely and find time for creativity. So plan for creativity when you get ready for your lessons. And of course, the last reason why our students might not be creative or might not use their critical thinking is that uh, if the lesson is teacher-centered, if the teacher talks most of the time and students only listen and repeat, they don't get any chance to express themselves. They don't get any opportunities to think, to explore, and create something, produce something. That's why try to opt for student-centered lessons, give students opportunities to question, to debate, and explore ideas themselves. All right, so let's look at some solutions. What else we can do? So, well, first of all, as I mentioned, very often students afraid can't use creativity or can't use their critical thinking skills because the problem is in the questions that we ask. So it's all about the questioning style and how we ask questions. So the first thing that you need to do is ask open-ended questions. So for example, so here's the picture that you can see a boy with like eating ice cream, yeah? And instead of asking students, does the boy feel happy or does the boy feel sad? Ask them, how does the boy feel? So encourage them to think uh, deeper, encourage them to express their opinion. Do not spoon feed them. The next one, provide students with opportunities to be explorative. So ask explorative questions. So when you ask students, why does he feel sad? Encourage students to express their opinion, so to like dig deeper and encourage them to use their critical thinking skills. So I think he feels sad because he's not smiling. He's not happy because he's not smiling, or maybe he doesn't like ice cream, that's why he feels sad, right? The next one, try to create non-judgmental environment. Make sure that everyone's opinion is appreciated, everyone is welcomed. You praise everyone for taking part, for answering, and show students that there is okay to express their opinions. There is no wrong answer. Everyone is welcome to say what they think. The next one, encourage elaboration. So when they answer something, encourage students to explain. Again, when they answer the question, how does the boy feel? And they say, I think he feels happy. Ask them, why do you think he feels happy? Like, what shows that he feels happy? Because he's eating ice cream. I always feel happy when I eat ice cream, right? So encourage them to explain their point of view. Then try to provide stimulating questions, questions that spark their curiosity, that requires them to think out of the box, and try to ask some personalized question. Relate the questions to their real life so that they know what to say, so that they have some ideas and they are eager to answer. So these are some things that we can do. And there are some more opportunities. Well, first of all, try to encourage students to observe the world around them. Try to apply constraints, give them some limitations, because if you just give them complete freedom, it will be even more difficult for them to be creative because they don't know what to start with. After all, they're young learners, they're kids, they need our support. So if you give them a task to write about a movie character, give them some prompts, tell them they need to write, for example, 5 sentences. They have to write about someone who is, I don't know, friendly, or they have to write about their personality traits, about things that they can do, and so on. So give some limitations, give some information that might help them to be creative, and encourage curiosity and a sense of wonder. So we're going to look at some activities that you can use in class to develop creative and critical thinking skills. So the first one, start with creative warm-ups. When you begin your lesson, um, begin with something creative. Try to use some colorful, interesting, exciting mood scales that catch students' attention. For example, you can find some mood scales, some memes on the internet, and ask students to choose the picture and elaborate again, explain why they feel like squirrel in picture one, because they're playful today, they're in a good mood or something. You can start with you can come up with a creative question and have students think about this question, imagine something, and come up with a creative answer. For example, if your mood were the weather, what would it be? I'm feeling sunny today because. I feel stormy today because. You can play the silly name game and have students add some silly nicknames to their names, ask them to be creative, or you can start with a mood menu, show a menu from the restaurant and ask them to pick one dish, for example, and add emotion that describes the way they feel. For example, I'm a happy burger, somebody is a sleepy soup, yeah, somebody is tired espresso. So try to be creative and develop your students' creativity. The next one, it's about creative writing, storytelling, and so on. So give students some creative writing tasks, but again, apply some constraints, provide prompts or sentences, provide some support, and guide them throughout the whole process because they're young learners after all. The next one, if you want your students to develop their critical thinking skills, you can introduce compare and contrast tasks. That is when you choose two pictures, two animals, two places, and have learners find similarities and differences. Like compare two pictures, look at these two dishes, how they're different, how they're similar, and so on. Then, odd one out is a great example of an activity that develops critical thinking skills because it requires students to think logically and draw some associations, draw some conclusions, and choose something that doesn't belong and explain why. For example, they have to look at this at the list of these places and choose the one that doesn't belong. So it can be library because that is the only place where we have to be quiet, right? Or perhaps that it can be hospital because that is the only place we go when we are unwell, when we're sick. So something like this. Then finally, problem-solving tasks, tasks that require students to use their critical thinking skills, to use their creativity, to come up with solutions. They have to work together, discuss, and decide. So you can come up with some complex tasks, or you can give students some real-life problems, some simple problems, and ask them to brainstorm the solutions all together, like choose the best Christmas present, or think about three activities that you can do when there is no internet, discuss it in pairs, find like the best solutions, and so on. So, I do hope that you were paying attention, that you were listening carefully. So let's reflect. On my screen, you can see some sentences that some beginners, sentence starters, sorry, and I'll ask you to reflect on everything you've heard and write your answers in chat. So, what is one thing that you found out today? Which advice you will definitely use, and what you will do next time you teach young learners? So, leave your comments in chat. Okay, waiting for your answers. Let's reflect together. Mhm. Okay, I can see your responses. Use unusual warmers. Okay, remember all the roles. Cool. What else? What will you do? Okay, thank you for your responses. I do hope that this webinar was useful and you have gained some insights, and I'm sure you'll definitely use something from this webinar. Just a reminder that tomorrow you will receive an article with the information that I told you today. And if you want to get the certificate, you have to pay for it, and you will get access to the test within the next 24 hours. So take your test, um, get great results, and you'll get the certificate. So I wish you all the best. I do hope that you'll have productive and fruitful lessons with your students. It was nice working with you today. Goodbye.